Hi folks, I'm back with another video, another one going through some of the records that are in my inbox that I purchased up to a year or more ago in some cases. Now 2025, not intentionally, became a year in which I picked up a number of items from what used to be Czechoslovakia. These now the two countries of the Czech Republic and Slovakia. I first came across these bands thanks to an Audion magazine guide that they put out to Eastern European prog rock. Unfortunately, at the time, these albums weren't easily obtainable. I did manage to get a couple of CDs by Collegium Musicum, one of the best, one of my favourite Czech groups. But on the whole, couldn't find much. Thankfully, in the last few years, a number of the albums have been reissued on vinyl. And last year, like I say, I managed to pick up a few of those reissues. And I think three or four actual originals as well. Anyway, let's get on with it. And we'll start with this album, Conjunctio. You're going to have to bear with me. My pronunciation on a lot of this is going to absolutely butcher the original language, but there you go. Anyway, this album was from 1970 on the Supraphon label, which I think was one of three state-owned, state-controlled labels in the old Czechoslovakia. Anyway, this features actually two groups, Blue Effect and Jazz Q Praha or Jazz Q Prague. Now, they're probably, in my mind, two of the best groups that came out of Czechoslovakia. Them along with Collegium Musicum probably make up my big three. Blue Effect were formed, I think, in 1968 as a quartet and were basically a blues rock, progressive blues sort of band. By the time they recorded this album, they'd already released their debut. Originally, they were a quartet, but by this point, they'd reduced to a trio. The main guy being Radim Hladik, who is the guitarist, brilliant guitarist actually, along with Jiří Kozel on bass and Vlado Czech on drums. Jazz Q, on the other hand, had been around since 1963, but hadn't put anything on vinyl until this. So this was basically their debut. They came from the jazz world, and in particular free jazz. And they were a four-piece, I think, according to this. The main two guys were Jerry Steven on flute and sax and Martin Krachovil on keyboards. And they were joined by Jiří Pellant on contrabass and Milan Vitoc on drums. So this album is basically the mixture of their two styles, the free jazz of Jazz Q, backed with the excellent blues guitar of Blue Effect and the blues rhythms of Blue Effect. And it really works excellently. Now, there's only 4 tracks on the album. the title track occupies all of side one, and part two of the title track is the final track on side two. And they're the only two tracks where the two bands basically play together. Track two, the start of side two, is basically just Blue Effect along with Jiří Stivin on flute and sax. And track three is just Jazz Q on their own. And like I said, this is an excellent mixture of that free jazz and blues rock. And surprisingly, after this album, both bands took away something from the other one in going forward. Blue Effect introduced jazz into their works, jazz fusion, whereas Jazz Q introduced the sort of rock elements of Blue Effect into their music and became a jazz fusion band rather than a free jazz band. But fiery stuff, excellent album, really does work well. 3 years after that first album, Jazz Q put out their second, this called The Watchtower, going by the English title. By this point, Jiří Stivin had left. He didn't want to go down that jazz fusion route that Martin Kratcheville had wanted to take. He wanted to stay in the jazz world, but split his time with classical music, where he became quite well known. So Martin Kratcheville took over the band, and by this album, apart from Martin, it was a totally new lineup. This is jazz fusion, but not this album isn't as fiery as the first album. This is jazz fusion done in a more laid back, atmospheric style on the whole. Excellent stuff. It's all instrumental apart from one track, Triffid, that starts side two in the 9-minute track, where they have vocals by Joan Duggan, an English lady from Newcastle who was living in Czechoslovakia at this point, and married a Czech musician. And her vocals come in at about the 7-minute mark on that 9-minute track. And they're pretty good, actually. I don't usually like, vocals on jazz fusion albums. I prefer them to be instrumental, but she's pretty good. And on their next album, which I haven't got, it seems that she was sort of front and center on that. So, but has gone by the next album that I'll show. But no, by this point, gone are the free jazz elements that were in the band previously. Excellent stuff. And we have another Jazz Q album. This is Elegy, where Martin Crutcherville gets front and bill in on this as Martin Crutcherville's Jazz Q. And this goes even further down the jazz fusion route. Really good stuff. And again, I think it's a totally new lineup. Yep. From the album I've just shown. This album was released in 1977 and is another original, did I say, on the Supraphon label, back on that label. Excellent. Now we move to the other band that was on that first album I showed, Blue Effect. Thanks to pressure from the Czech authorities, they had to change their name from Blue Effect, an English title, to its Czech equivalent, Modrý Effekt. As I said, they went down a jazz fusion vein. But by this album, which is titled Modrý Effekt and Radim Chladich, which was released in 1975, they were moving more and more to a sort of symphonic prog vein, though from the jazz fusion side. So you've still got the jazz fusion element, but it's become more and more more and more straight prog. On this album, you have guesting Martin Crutcherville from Jazz Q on piano, and more importantly, you have Jiří Stivin, the flute and sax player that used to be in Jazz Q and was on that first album, and he makes a big impact on here. Some great flute playing, particularly on the first track on side 2, where his flute playing starts out sounding very much in the style of Ties van Leer, but about halfway through he starts introducing sort of the vocalizations through the flute that sort of Ian Anderson did. But standout on here is obviously Radim Hladik himself. His guitar playing is superb. This is a 2024 reissue. Sticking with Modri Effect for the next two albums, though it was more M Effect by this record, which the previous one I showed was from 1975 and was their fifth album, I think. And this is from 1978 and is their seventh album. And it's called Svet Ledachu. Again, apologies for the pronunciation. And this goes even further down the prog rock route, the jazz fusion elements being reduced. On here, the lineup includes obviously Radim Hladik on superb guitar, Vlado Czech on drums and percussion, and you have two keyboard players, Leszek Semelka, who's been with the band for a while, obviously on other albums, and a new keyboard player on Oldrich Vesely. So no bassist on this album. And it is, again, further down that prog rock route, but they've started to introduce vocals. And it's the two keyboard players who provide those vocals. The new guy, Oldrich Vesely, is by far, I think, the better vocalist. The other one has a rougher, rawer type of vocal style. But the vocals don't take a large part in the album. It's the instrumental quality of the album that stands out. I said this is from 78 and this is a 2021 reissue. Still with Modri Effect, or again M Effect, we have this album 33, and this was from 1981, and I think was their final album that they did. At this point, they were down to a trio. The keyboard player that had been introduced on the last album I showed had left, so it was Radim Hladik on guitar, Leszek Semelka on keyboards, and Vladimir Czech on drums. Now, here again, only 5 tracks, stretched out quite a bit, but the vocals take a bigger part in the songs, and unfortunately, it's the rawer vocals of Leszek Semelka that are on here. The weaker, I think, of the 2 vocalists that they had on the previous album. You get used to them, these vocals, but I could probably do without it. On here, they introduce also, I think, elements of funk into their version of prog jazz fusion. I said this was their final album, 1981, and this is a 2023 reissue.
Nohy vzhůru židlím dáš, zavíráš, já tě chápu, to se máš, trička bláznů.
Moving on from the jazz cue and Modry Effect, who were both from Prague, I think, so therefore would now be considered as part of the Czech Republic. We have the only album from what would now become Slovakia, and that's an album by Pavel Hamel and Marian Varga. Now, Marian Varga was the keyboardist in Collegium Musicum, brilliant musician. And Pavel Hamel was a singer-songwriter, rhythm guitarist, who worked with Marian Varga in a band. Were they called Prudis or something similar to that? A beat group prior to Collegium Musicum getting together. But this is an album from 1972 that they did together. This is a 2017 reissue. And you wouldn't believe it's from 72, actually. It sounds more as an album that would have been done in the late 60s. It has pop elements. You get Baroque pop on here. You get the first track on side 2 is very much in the sort of, starts off very much as like a Procol Harum track, but then morphs into something that the Nice would have done. With Marian Varga on here, you obviously get a lot of classical influences, the sort of stuff he brought to Collegium Musicum. So this is stylistically a bit all over the place in terms of its pop, it's progressive, but it's actually really good. I wasn't so sure the first time I heard it. It was a bit of wasn't what I was expecting from a Marian Varga album. but the more I listen to it, the more I like it. So if you like late 60s progressive pop with elements of psychedelia and classical music, I'd check this one out. Excellent stuff.
Zkusím jeden starý trik, napodobím bávý krik. Aspoň zajtra, ak nie dnes, zvolám veľký bávý ples. Príde 12 krásnych dám, pánom bávie masky dám. Každý bude chvíľu kráľ, usporiada bávý bál.
Now we go on to a new group to me, and that was the band Flamengo. And this is their only album that they ever did from 1972. And I won't try and pronounce the title. You can see the title there. That's the band on the back. Now, Flamengo were a band playing very much in that jazz rock, brass rock sort of style, a la sort of Colosseum, Mogul Thrash, If sort of style. They were a six-piece, but for me, the main guy on here is Jan Kubich, who is the saxophone player. He's all over this, and he's brilliant. Excellent. So if you like that sort of progressive jazz rock a la Colosseum, I think you'd enjoy this. I think this was a Jubilee 40th anniversary, I think, edition, came out in 2012. Highly recommended, again, as all of these albums are. They're surprising, not really surprising, they're excellent and deserve to be better known in the West.
To město plný drátu. Jen týden mám a budu 7krát bez zpátku. Spálenej láskou svou a paměť spí a do pokoje den se vkrádá.
Next we have another band that was new to me, Bohemia. Now again, I won't try and butcher that title. You can see it there. And they were a supergroup of sorts, featuring the keyboards of Leszek Stamelka from Modry Effect. You had Jan Kubich on saxophone and flute from Flamengo. You also had, I think, the bassist from Flamengo, Vladimir Kolanek. You've got two other keyboard players, Jan Haller on synthesizer and Michael Kochab on piano and clavinet. And the only unknown at the time was a young guitarist, Michael Pavlicek, who does a superb job on this album. He's really an excellent guitarist. Again, like flamenco, I think one of the best musicians on here is Jan Kubik on saxophone. Unfortunately, the vocals of Leszek Semelka, again, are in that very raw style that we heard with Modry Effect. It takes some getting used to on here because they play a bigger part. Even though there's only 5 tracks, so the tracks are extended out, but there's a little bit too much of his vocalization for my liking. But otherwise, when he's not singing, this is excellent.
Vidí víc než je zdrávo, vidí v nás tajné zátoky i myšlenky, co táhnou hlavou.
And finally, we have the band Olympic with that title, if you can pronounce that. I think it, if I remember rightly from what I read, it means holidays on Earth. Now, Olympic started in 1963, I think, as a sort of beat group. Produced loads of singles, but didn't produce their first album until 1968, by which point they were introducing a bit of psychedelia into the band. In the 70s, they went down a more commercial pop route, I think, thanks to the Czech authorities having banned their early albums. So to locate them and to prevent further bannings, they took a more commercial route. But by this album, which came out in 1980, they'd moved to a sort of harder rock with progressive elements, an art rock more than out-and-out prog rock vein. Very much sounding to my ears like a bit like Omega, the Hungarian prog band, who followed a sort of similar route, coming from pop roots to a more progressive style. This was part of a concept that occupied 3 albums, it seems. After that point, I'm not sure what sort of style of music they followed, because they're still going, I think, to this day. Led by Petr Janda, the guitarist. So from 63 up to today, I think. It's a long career, a lot of albums. This is the only one I've ever heard. It's really good, actually, in that hard rock with prog elements. The synthesizer is basically up front on this. I'd recommend this. I don't know anything like say whether I could recommend any of their other albums, but well worth checking out. So that's it. That's the albums I got. I think all of those were in 2025. I hope you found that of interest. Hope that maybe get you interested in checking out some of these bands from the Czech Republic and Slovakia. But so that's it for another video. Hopefully get another one out soon. Take care, folks. All the best.